Good Friday morning, Mount Olive family, friends of Mount Olive, all you who have taken the time to tune in and watch these videos or devotions. I'm sorry, devotions. So, as I always say, I appreciate each one of you for taking the time to do that. Let me share my screen with you. It's a little slow today. Okay, let me move my stuff out of the way. So, I entitled my devotion, Winning the Battle of the Mind. That's what Pastor TJ used, Overcoming Temptations, taken from Matthew 4. He continued his series on winning the battle of the mind this past Sunday. His focus, as I said, for his message was overcoming temptation. And now, chapter 4 is familiar to Bible readers because this is a passage after Jesus is baptized by John the Baptist, and Jesus is led up into the wilderness by the Spirit to be tempted of the devil. So let's read some of these scriptures. Look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 5. It says, Then the devil taketh him up into the holy city and setteth him on the pinnacle of the temple. And verse 6 says, And saith unto him, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. Then verse 7 says, And Jesus said unto him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Pastor TJ, he used these verses to speak about the second temptation that Christ faced from the devil, that being the pride of life. Now, the Bible tells us in First John chapter 2 that sin falls into three categories. So let's look at those verses. Chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. John says, Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If a man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And he said, verse 16, For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. Now, the three temptations that Satan did for to Jesus was, the lust of the flesh about him. He was hungry. He said, if you can turn these stones to bread. Then the pride of life, he said, cast yourself down from this temple, and the angels will catch you. And then the lust of the eyes, when he offered him all the kingdoms of the world, if he would just follow him. So Pastor TJ, he said in his message that Satan also knows scriptures, and here he intentionally misquotes Psalm 91, 11, and 12. So let's look again at Matthew 4, 6. Matthew 4, 6, And he saith unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. Now let's look at Psalm 91, 11 and 12. Verse 11 says, For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. Now Satan, he left that out. Notice I underlined it. And he said, verse 12 said, They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. So he intentionally leaves that to keep thee in all thy ways. Now, why would the devil leave that phrase out? Now, God has given his angels the responsibility of protecting his people and to preserve us wherever we go, as long as we're following him and in his will. Now, if the devil could convince Jesus to cast himself down from the temple, Jesus would be out of the will of God and in his own will. As Pastor said in his message, the devil was trying to say, Jesus, go ahead and throw yourself down. And when God's angels appear and catch you, all the people will believe you're the Son of God and make you king. And you won't have to go the way of the cross, which is the pride of life. Now, we can all fall into the temptation of the pride of life. Pastor TJ said this in his message about Christians and churches, and I put it in as a quote. He said, sometimes we're too religious and have too much pride in our own selves. We look down and are very critical of others instead of loving them and telling them to come into the house of God. I thought that was very very meaningful statement. You know, sometimes Christians use their Christianity as a stumbling block for the lost around us. They judge how people look, how they talk, what they wear. And Jesus, he sat and ate with publicans and sinners. And we won't even sit next to them in church. We're like the parable about the Pharisee and the publican that Jesus talks about in Luke 18. Let's look at those verses. Luke 18, 9 through 40 says, and he, being Jesus, spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Now, this was, directly as Pastor said, sometimes we use our Christianity as a stumbling block. And he said, two men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. Sorry, two men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. And then verse 11, he said, the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even this publican. So he was like, oh, I'm glad I'm not like all those others, and I'm glad I'm not like this one over here. He went on to say in verse 12, he said, I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. In verse 13, and the publican standing afar off would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus says in verse 14, he said, I tell you, this man, the publican, went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. It's time to lose the pride of life and be accepted, because Jesus didn't die just for some, he died for all. That's what we need to remember. We're not the judge. We shouldn't judge people by their appearance or how they talk or anything. Jesus died for everyone. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world, these and the world being everyone, not just a few people, but everyone. He didn't pick and choose. It was an offer that was made to everyone. And sometimes, as I've said, we Christians, can be a stumbling block to those that come in. And if they don't look like us, dress like us, talk like us, then we're not accepting. So let's be sure. Let's be sure that while we're in this world, that we're doing our very best to be the kind of light that Jesus wants us to be, that we would be accepting and that we would lead others to Christ. That's my devotion for today. I hope to see you on Sunday, Lord willing. So you all continue to remember my wife, Teresa. We found out they are going to do a right heart cath up at UVA on Friday the 26th. So we'll be going up for that. So you all remember her in your prayers, that God will just continue to work with her, work with the doctors, that they can find the treatment plan for what's going on for her. Thank you very much. We'll hopefully see you Sunday.